Hey Quilties, it's Karen Marchetti. This time on Dual Process, Jodi Robinson and I have a few ideas. We're working on this Carpenters Star. We will each share a more simple version and a more complex version. So grab your printable and let's get started. It's Karen again. So for my more simple version, I'm just gonna be very loopy. Okay, I'm naturally loopy, but we're gonna quilt some loopies. So I'm gonna start here. I'm just gonna fill this with just random loops. I'm trying to make this as continuous as possible, so it may seem a little weird, the path I'm gonna take, but hopefully it'll work out for the best. And sometimes I'll forget things. That happens all the time. So I'll stitch to there. I'm going to assume I can get about this much in one roll. Okay, so from here I'm going to have an imaginary line right through the center of this diamond. And I'm going to do a small loop, a bigger loop, a large loop, a bigger, and then a small. So they kind of like stagger in size. And from here I'll go up this one, same thing, 2 tinies, 2 mediums, 1 large. So when I get here, I'm going to fill this section just because I'm here. Come right back to where I was, and then I'll fill this one. Do the loopies across here. And then do this diamond. And now I know on this one I'm going to need to travel this way and also come back this way. So what I'll do is I'll only do the loopies in the top half. And that way it will give me a place to travel when I need to come back. Fill this diamond, loopies in the background, fill this diamond, and again I'm here, so I might as well fill this square while I'm here. And then we'll continue with these diamonds. And then we'll fill this section just with the loops. And you can do them super tiny, you can do them larger, you can mix it up. That's personal preference. I usually like them all different shapes. Well, sizes, I should say. They're all round. But I like them different sizes because that way I don't have to pay attention as much. So now that I'm here, I want to roll the quilt just a little bit. Keep my needle down. But I have to realize that I still need to be from here to about here. So I will roll the quilt this much. I'll come down here, fill in these loops, and now go back and fill in the diamonds. So you'll see why I only did half of that on point 1, because I need to get over to here. I don't want to be stitching in the ditch on any of this. I want this super simple. So from here, I'll fill in the other half of that square on point, and now I'm back here to continue filling the diamonds. Oh, I got a little crazy on that one. And then I'll do the loops in this piece of background. So again, I'm only rolled to about here, so now I'll roll a little bit again to have this section from here. I'll fill this diamond. So now I can just fill this whole background piece. Whoops. I wanted to be right back where I started, so I just squished up my loops to get back where I needed to. Now here's that half one again. We only want to go on the top half, so we can use the other half to travel back. And then fill the diamond. Now this one I can fill the whole thing again, but remember I want to come back to this point. So I'll make sure to fill all the rest in so I can get back to right there. Do that last diamond, fill in the piece of background. Fill in that diamond. Fill in that diamond, go up this one, fill this square while we're here, I'm going to come this way. I'm not going to do these 2 diamonds on the bottom. We will catch them when we come back on this last row. So we'll fill this background in. I'll do this diamond. I'll do this diamond. Fill in this. Whoops, I was doing a meander there, not loops. But you can, if you wanted to do a meander in that background, you most certainly can. And come out this diamond. Fill in this piece of background. And now I'm here, and I can do that last roll so we can fill in this last section. Okay. Again with the loops in the background. Finish up your loops, and the quilt is done. So there it is. It's a very simple, especially if you're using one color thread.
Hi everyone, it's Jodi. I'm going to share with you now the simple design idea that I've come up with, y'all, for this Carpenters Star quilt. And we're going to kind of do this in 2 sections. So I'm envisioning that this isn't a gigantically huge quilt. Of course, if it were, you would just probably divide it into 4 different sections, or however, you know, that's going to depend on your throat space. But I'm going to do it as if this were kind of on a smaller scale, so we can kind of do half at a time. And so that's what I'm talking about. We'll work the top part and then come back down and do the bottom. Exactly the same as the top. And so I know in looking at the picture, you may say simple, you know, I mean, there's all these ruler lines. Now, if you're not someone who loves to use a ruler, doesn't do a lot of ruler work, you could very easily use wavy lines in place of those. The only disadvantage to using the wavy lines around in all of the background would be that you really would need to mark those lines in so you have something to follow with your wavy line. The reason that this really is quite simple is that though all of the lines that are used in all of the background spaces are simply done using the markings on the ruler And we're going off of, in the corners, we're going to go from these seams. So we can just line our ruler up here to get these lines, and then you simply echo that out, and you'll see as we do that. And then you can't really get much simpler than swirls, curls, whatever you'd like to call them. And we're going to do those as we travel around the star. And so looking at this, as you load your quilt, you have a couple of choices. You could choose to stitch in the ditch, and I do want to stitch in the ditch around all of these main things as well as the star. You can do that before or after. For me personally, it depends on the quilt. If there's a lot of extra fabric in the quilt, for example, I might choose to stitch in the ditch first to kind of set it all where it needs to be. For this one, I'm going to do it as I go, kind of. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I would come in here, and I want to do this star quilting. And remember, we're only doing half to start. And I chose something that I can do as I travel, meaning that I'm going to come along this seam line, and what I'm going to do is go in and do a small curl, a big curl, and then another curl, and then travel back down because we want it to look kind of ribbony. And then I'll do this one, and I'm going to use the same direction. I'm making mine all be the same. Small, big, small, travel down. And now I'm just going to travel along this, stitch it in the ditch as I go, come down here, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to have a curl, big curl, small, echo back out, and we'll just repeat this in each of the diamonds. Again, I will stitch in the ditch to travel, stitch in the ditch to travel, and then pick up, oh, I've missed one. That's always something that happens. So now I would stitch in the ditch. When I come to this point, I'm going to go ahead and do these curls. And again, I'm just going to keep them all the same. Travel out, small, large, small, travel back out. Don't forget it. Usually I only need to forget it one time to not forget it anymore through at least this quilt. I'm going to travel in the ditch, curls. And these are going to be, you know, the great thing about these is that they don't need to all be exactly the same. And they're just really pretty and forgiving. Okay, so at this point, I'm only doing half. So I'm going to go ahead and I would ditch this, and I'll just tie off right here. Okay. And I guess I kind of started in the wrong place. So over here, I should have started with this one. So let me go ahead and put this in. And probably I do need to stitch that in the ditch, but I would have started probably here to stitch in the ditch and then do these three and travel. Hope that's not too confusing. So now that that's done, the inner part of this Carpenter's Star is stitched. I'm going to go ahead and come down and do half of this center star. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to put these same swirls into each of these diamonds that make up the star. And I do want to stitch in the ditch around this as well. So I would go ahead and do that probably first. It would probably try to be more in the ditch than that. And then I would tie off, come into the center here, and do these swirls. Same thing. Small, big, small, echo back out. And so you can see, I mean, this really would go fairly fast. Not that it's always about being fast, but you know, if you can do a design that's really pretty and relatively quick to do, that's a bonus. So I'm going to tie off because I know that I can't really reach any farther than that. So now I'm ready to go ahead, and you certainly could do this throughout the whole quilt and then go back to do the background, but I kind of like to complete like this whole segment, I mean, while I'm already there. So now I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm it's hard to say the scale with this, but in my head, those lines that I used in the background would probably be 1/2 inch spacing. So it's not too tight, and it's not going to, you know, be too much, but it'll nicely contrast these curvy curves. So to do this, like I said, I do need to stitch this whole thing in the ditch. So I am going to go ahead and start, I would probably start over here and ditch this as far as I can reach. Again, they would be nice and straight. Well, mostly. And I can reach to here. So that puts me right at a place where I can use my 1/2 inch spacing. And again, I would line up with the edge of the quilt here and just do these. And I would sneak back out along the seam line. Then on this one, I'm going to go ahead because we do need to stitch around the outside if you haven't done that already. But otherwise, you can travel in this stitch in the ditch that you already done. So this time, we're just going to use our ruler to do the 1/2 inch. And we're going to go follow this piecing right here. So that makes it nice and easy. You have something to go off of. And that puts us over here. And we can do the spacing. Oh, it looks like wavy lines. And I would sneak out of here. Sneak out. Down this seam line. And I'm going to do the same thing by following that seam. I'm going, the first line is going to be 1/2 inch away, and then I'm just going to continue to do that for the entire quilt. Oh, corner. Whoa. Down here, I can do this one. And I can tie off here because I can't reach any more of that. And then in these little corners, what we'll do is again use the piecing. It's already there, so I'm going to line my ruler up and do this. And I would come over, I'd sneak up here. Now for these ones, what I'm going to do is I want to substantiate where this center is, and I'm just lining my ruler up with the 2 corners of the squares. And then I'll do one side, sneak back down and do this side. You can tie off and come over here, or you could travel along your stitch in the ditch, and I'll repeat what I did over here. And you see what's going to happen is that because this one's going like this and this one, and then it's going to be in all 4, it'll give the illusion that that's behind the rest of the piecing. So I do need to come down here and do this one. So again, I'll go from this piecing seam to this seam to get my center line. These ones, of course, tie off, come over to this one and do the same thing. And that will finish that portion. So at this point, I advance the quilt, and we're just simply going to do the exact same thing on this bottom part. And that brings us to this last little section, a tie off. Oh, almost. I totally forgot the center. Back out. Now we're done. Okay, and so now you can see just the difference in contrast. I mean, these nice, easy to do curls go really well with the nice straight lines. It just really gives it that contrast. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I will be back with another idea for you for a little more complex design for this Carpenters Star quilt.
Okay, for my more complex version, it's a lot of background fills and a little bit of feathers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an area of rest around the star. Just like that. And then when you get here, at this point, we're going to fill back. If you don't like stitching right to left, you can tie off and start on the left again. Going right to left doesn't bother me, so that's what I'm going to draw. And I'm just doing some curlies. You can do whatever you want. I just like curlies. They go pretty fast for me. Again, personal preference on fills. Whichever you prefer. Whoops, too far. Whichever fill you prefer. You can do it super dense. Like in my drawing, I have it pretty dense. Or you can do them larger. Whichever you prefer. Sneak through that seam line. Fill this in. And of course, if I were stitching, they would be thousands of times neater than this. This is messy, but it gets you the idea. Just filling those. Oh, again, I'm going to assume that I can fit about that much from here to here into between my frame. If it were smaller, you'd have to adjust your path if you had a smaller frame. Or a smaller arm, I should say. Just finish with that fill. Now, being the more complex version, we're going to have to do some tie-offs. If you can fit down to here, you can go ahead and fill that as well. Let's do it on the other side. There we go. Okay, so again, if you can fit less, you'd have to do more tie-offs, assuming that we can fit about half of it. From here, do you see how these diamonds, let me change color again. You see, change color, there we go. You see how these diamonds kind of look like three of them fit into a connection point? That's how I'm going to fill them. So there's another 3, and there's another 3. So I'm basing all my tie-offs right here where all the 3s come together. Okay. Get rid of this. Change my color back. So I'm going to start here and create that same area of rest. And I'll show you 2 versions. I'm going to do one at a time, and then I'll do the 3 more continuous. And then I'm going to just fill with half feathers. You can fill it with whatever feather you prefer, but I can cut back down with a half feather pretty easily. Do the next one. Fill with half feathers. Cut through. And then the third. Half feathers. Cut back through. So that's if I were to do 1, 2, 3. On this one, again, tie off, And you can do all of your continuous curve, creating those areas of relief at one time, and then go into your feathers. Whichever works better for you. I like doing one at a time because you'll see how I hesitated there. I have to think if I'm going here or here. So that's why I like to do them one at a time. Again, personal preference. Okay, now while I'm still here, I'm going to fill this background section again with the swirlies. And come back here. Now I'll fill this one because I'm here. Why tie off and start again? If you're there, go ahead and fill it. And now I'm right here for my next set. Fill that in. Do our half feathers. Next one. So it looks really intense, but the thing that takes the longest is all that background fill. So we're from here, I'll fill this background. Now I want to be over here, so that's where I'm going to aim for to finish my fill so that I'm in the right place. And now I'll finish this last section of 3. Again, this is super messy, I apologize. Okay, before I roll, I want to fill these 4. Okay. So I will start in the center. And again, if you want to do one at a time or do multiples, that's your choice, which you prefer. Finish filling that last one. Okay, and now we have to roll a little bit to get these 2. So we'll just fill them right now. If you can squeeze them in on your frame, that's great. But sometimes you have to do those little partial rolls so everything fits real nice. I'd rather do most of it as continuous as possible, which would be all that, and then just fill in this little one, and then I can go ahead and roll and do all this. So now I'm going to advance the quilt, and we're kind of going to do that same thing in reverse. So now I'm going to start here and do my echoes, or my continuous curve to create that area of rest. And then go back with the background fill, and then do my diamond shapes. So I will bring you back at the end. Okay, so now that's full of stitching. You have a background fill and you have a feather fill. Again, if you were doing them two different colors, it would be, you know, a few more tie-offs because you wouldn't be able to fill these as you go. Okay, so, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.
Here we go with an idea for you that's a little more complex for this Carpenter's Star quilt. And looking at the screen here, you can see that I've done some marking in yellow. What I did was I marked in these diagonal lines because as you can see from the picture, I'm going to do some straight lines in these areas. And I just want to remember, you know, where they're going to be. You also notice all these little X's, and that's just because we're going to switch. We're going to do straight lines out here, and then in the other parts we're going to do a background fill. So that X just reminds me what I'm doing, because there's nothing worse than, you know, doing a tight fill in an area and then realizing, oh no, that wasn't where I was supposed to do it, because that's a lot of ripping. So I like to do just some basic little, you know, marking stuff to remind myself. And then I also have these little dots so I don't forget where I'm starting these little feather segments. Okay, so if you remember from the first simple version, this is very similar actually. It's just we're going to work our way around this inside to add the feathers. And we also need to stitch in the ditch around the outside. We can do half of this at once. We're going to figure on that for this one as well. So the first thing I probably would do is just go ahead and ditch this outside. And I would start halfway, so about here. And I'm going to ditch this before I do anything else. Now, one option that you do have, and I quite possibly would do this because it's easy to do something as you go if you can. So I started here, ditched right here. When I get to this part, I know I want this line stitched in because that's going to be where the straight lines are. So what I might do is go out and back and then continue. And as I do that, I'll do it the whole way around, just because then that's kind of one other part of this that's already done. Out and back. And right here is where I'll tie off because I can't reach any farther. And then I'm going to come into this inner part. And I'm going to stitch in the ditch here. And at this, I have the little yellow dot, so that's telling me don't forget, you're going to put some feathers in here. And what I'm going to do is just fill both sides, and I'm going to work both sides at once. So, and I'm going to stay, each side stays contained in one of these diamonds. So I'm going to do feather, feather. There's 3. I put 3 in there. You can put, you know, maybe you want them to be thinner, and then I can travel back down to create the spine, and I'll ditch up here. And again, I'm already here, so I'm going to go in here, and right now I'll go back out, stop again because I have another yellow dot, and I'm going to do the same thing. The feathers are just going to look a little different this time because they're kind of flowing down. Ooh, these are a little sloppy. And this one I put a top on and back out. Continue. Now we do the other feathers. 1, 2. Oh, I'm doing a little bit too big here. Back out. Travel. Stitch it in the ditch as you go. And then we're going to do another set of these. Back out. Come over to here. I'm going to go ahead and go down and back. And then we have the set of feathers that has the little top on it. I like to put that little spiky thing in the top too. In the ditch, we have another little yellow dot that's telling me, don't forget you're putting feathers in here. And you could, maybe you like leaves better than feathers or something, or it would go better with the quilt. You could certainly do those in these spaces instead of the feathers. So right here, I could say, oh, well, I'm just going to tie off. But actually, I mean, I'm right here. And what I'm doing in this, I'm just going to do a fill. On my drawing, I did stippling. I'm just going to do some, scribbly. What I'm going to do, because I can only reach half of this, I'm just going to go ahead and do my fill. And it's going to let me get over here. I would make sure I got that filled in. So I'm going to go ahead real quick and stitch this in the ditch. As I come to these, I'm going to go ahead in here and just do my fill because I'm here. Why not? Ditch. Skip this one because these are the straight lines. I'm going to come down here and I'll go ahead and fill. And remembering that I can only reach half. And then I tie off. At this point, I might as well go ahead and come into the center here and do we're going to repeat exactly what we did on the outer part, just like in the simple version. But on this one, I can only do half. So I'm going to do just half of this. And then I'll do only half when I advance the quilt and do the next part. Here I'm doing the full 2 at once. And then over here I'm gonna again only do half. Okay, so now I really just need to get the rest of this done. I'm going to come out here to the outside edge and go ahead and do my fill. And it's nice because you can travel around the outer edge of the quilt. I want to come up here and now I can do these lines. I have let me get this fill in here first. And I can just use this line that I've already stitched to do my little 1/2 inch lines in here. Over here, fill, sneak to the next one, fill, fill, whoa. And at this point, using that line that we've already stitched, I can do these. And then pick back up and fill in these. And then I need to tie off there. Then I'm going to come in and I will need to do each of these separately. And for me, I find it easier. I have this line here, so I'm just going to go from that to do these. And then I'd sneak in the seam to do these, tie off. We're going to come over here, do these. And that finishes that top part. And so something to think about is, like I showed you, if you can complete some parts as you travel, it makes the whole process of the quilting a little faster. It's not necessary. You can certainly tie off and just move to a different part. So as you can see, it's pretty easy actually to stitch. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and advance the quilt, and I'm just going to repeat this whole process for the bottom section. Okay, so that's our last little section there. I know it looks a little sloppy. It's hard when you're drawing it. But, you know, it really, none of this quilting is actually difficult. It's just a matter of maybe you need to do a tiny little bit of marking. But that gives you, you know, some lines to follow and you don't forget anything or get confused. So I hope you might give that a try. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed today's designs, and be sure to join us for the next episode of Dual Process.